Yo, what is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Awesemo.com NBA strategy show presented by PrizePicks. I'm Dave Loughran, joining you, hosting today for the second time all year. The only time I did it prior to this was when, well, Adam didn't know he was on a show, but he knows he's on one today. Adam Scherer at Ship My Money DFS on Twitter. What's going on, bro?
Not much. Woke up in time to do the show today. I did have a little bit of a scare because I wasn't at my apartment over the weekend, so I hadn't set my clocks back on like my microwave and stuff. And so like I woke up, got ready to do the show, went to make coffee, look, and it's like 10:30. I'm like, oh shit. And I realized.
I set mine back the night before I went to bed because I knew I would just forget about it. But at the same time, you don't look at your phone when you wake up. Like, what's the first?
I did.
Okay.
And that's why I didn't.
Oh, you weren't sure which was which.
Well, gotcha. I knew that I was good, but it was just like when I walked into the kitchen, I looked and it says 10:30, and just like immediately it was like, oh no, like right. And then I was like, oh, you didn't set your clocks back.
What's the first thing you do when you open your eyes?
Shit tweet.
So you go straight on your phone.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a problem, man.
The first thing I do is see what time it is and if I can go back to sleep. And then,
well, yeah, but on your phone, of course.
Yeah.
And then if it's time to wake up, straight on Twitter.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, dude, the other day, my, how you told me how to set up the like time limit.
Yeah, I still have that for some reason.
I think mine hit at noon the other day.
Dude, I've had mine hit at 2 a.m.
Yeah, well, mine was a 4-hour limit. Not good. But anyway, we're happy to have you guys with us. As always, got Adam Scherer with us. Took down 40K the other night, huh?
Yeah, I got second in basketball a couple nights ago. Gave a good chunk of it back on NFL last night.
Yo, that slate was that showdown. See, I'm not sure I've seen some weird stuff, but that was one of the most absurd things I've ever seen in my life from an NFL. It feels like complete randomness sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, like even watching the game, it was just like I kept looking and seeing how much I was down at NFL, and I was like, yeah, whatever. When they start scoring, that'll change, and then it gets like halfway through the third, and then the fourth, and it's like, oh shit, they're just not gonna score. And
then Lamar throws a pick in the end zone on basically like the final relevant play of the game. It was outrageous. The best play in the game was Robert Hunt, the offensive lineman, catching that pass illegally.
Yeah, and scoring.
And barreling to the goal line. And that was amazing. So that was about, go ahead.
How was that Mark Andrews play not a catch? Like I still haven't.
I don't know, dude. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, listen, I don't get it. I will say though, the Sammy Watkins catch and fumble, people were complaining about. That was a catch. I mean,
I thought so.
He caught it, took several steps, lowered his head. I mean, if that's not a catch, nothing is. But you don't know anymore. You have no idea what's what anymore in the NFL when it comes to these rules. I mean, there was a roughing the passer against Miami on Lamar. The one was legit. He pile drove him to the ground. Yeah. Then the second one, he came in and like hit him, but protected Lamar to make sure neither of them went down.
Right.
So there's no ability to differentiate anymore. It makes for a great night on Twitter, though. I'll tell you, like, I don't really get mad anymore. I just kind of enjoy the ride. But then you've got other people like our boy Gordon. You gotta love the guy, but Gordon Hayward, who I'm not going by the real name, but who just loses it, man. He's telling me, there's no way you can play 3 straight quarters and only throw screen passes. And you know what? To some extent, I'm reading this tweet and I'm like, you know what? Maybe you're not wrong, man. Maybe there's a lot more to this that we don't know about. But then I go, so you don't bet on NFL then, right? He goes, of course I do. I'm just sick though. So, I don't know. Ready to talk some basketball?
Yeah, I guess.
All right, let's do it. Of course, we got 11 games today. Hit that thumbs up if you haven't done so yet. Bright and early it's really almost 10 o'clock, but bright and early somewhat to many of us, if you're on the West Coast especially. And, you don't have Eric around. You don't have Josh. What's Josh doing? I know Eric's getting married. What's Josh doing?
Vacation in like Tampa or something.
Oh, okay. Well, cool. Hit the thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet. And if you want to join, hit that join down below. You get the custom emojis, the badges, all of that good stuff. We'll answer your questions in priority order, and you get the shout outs as well. So we'd love to have you a part of the team. It's your decision. You don't want to? All good. All right. New York Knicks, Charlotte Hornets. The Knicks laying 1.5 on the road, 222.5 total. How about the fact that we just saw them get benched for the starters get benched for 14 straight minutes the other day?
Yeah, that Tibbs wasn't real happy with those guys after the game. I don't remember the exact quote, but said something about like their effort level being bullshit or something.
What do you make of them against the Hornets then? Again, it should be a very close game. They're 1.5-point favorites. I don't see this game getting out of control.
Yeah, really good spot too. I mean, the Hornets are one of the fastest teams in the league. They are not very good defensively. The only issue is the pricing. I mean, Julius Randle, I think, looks great, but he's also $10,200 on DraftKings. So difficult to prioritize that on an 11-game slate. If you get to him a little bit, that's obviously going to be fine. I think the same can be said for, Barrett, Rose, Walker. I do like the pricing a little bit better on guys like Kemba and even Mitchell Robinson at 4K. It's always tough to use somebody like Robinson at a center spot, but he is really cheap. If he stays out of foul trouble, there's certainly a path to him playing, upper 20s in minutes. And then Kemba at 5K and even Rose at 4,800. You've seen all year that typically Kemba is going to get the bulk of the minutes, but when Rose plays well, he can close over Kemba. So either one of them in tournaments, I think, are reasonable. So I don't really see anything that looks like a priority here, but I do think that, mixing in some Randall, Barrett, Rose, Walker, Robinson, any of those guys, because this is a good matchup for them.
So when it comes to Charlotte, you've got guys like LaMelo Ball, whose price point is soaring recently, man. And, you and I talked a lot about it at the beginning of the year where we weren't really seeing the minutes that we wanted to. Now he's still getting, kind of erratic in the sense that it's anywhere from, 31 to 34. He did play 42 minutes the other day, but that's surely an outlier. Is that a price point that you're okay getting to against the Knicks? Because 9,900 on an 11-game slate where you just have a bevy of top-end players seems pretty steep to me.
Yeah, it's kind of like Julius Randle to me, where if I look at a lineup and it has LaMelo Ball in it, I'm not going to be upset because he gives you a really high ceiling, but I'm also not going to be going out of my way to jam in a bunch of LaMelo on a slate this big at what I think is probably the correct price tag, if not a little bit overpriced. I think he's too expensive compared to his medium projection, but the ceiling he gives you is why there's still some merit in using him. There's going to be some games where he plays 34, 35 minutes and he obviously produces at a high level, but there's just going to be better options in terms of where they're priced.
Who else on this team is worthwhile to you? And I have to at least ask about Miles Bridges because he's been remarkably consistent. At 8K, though, again, 11 games, it's something I don't want to ignore when you have this many games on a slate like this. His shot volume, though, has been through the roof, and that's kind of what you're looking for, right? He gets a lot of high efficiency buckets as well. So is Bridges somebody that in this spot is worth getting to, or are you just not really on much from Charlotte today? By the way, he does have a 24% usage rate, which is not insane, but it's up about 7% from where it was last season.
Yeah, he's, I think, priced about where he should be. There was definitely, I didn't buy into his fantasy improvement early in the year, but he's maintained like a 23 or so percent usage rate since Terry Rozier's come back as well. So it seems like he's really just kind of taking usage from Hayward at this point, like usage that we expected to go to Hayward. So I do buy into him at this salary, but I also think he's priced where he should be. I don't really see much that stands out as a priority from Charlotte. I will once again point out Kelly Oubre at 4,400. He came through big on Wednesday, but once again, Ish Smith was not in the rotation. So Smith has played a total of 5 minutes over the last 3 games. What that does is it opens up more minutes for the combination of Kelly Oubre and Cody Martin. If Oubre is playing well, you can expect him to take a lot of those minutes. And then he also has seen a higher usage rate since when Terry Rozier plays, because Oubre goes from the starting lineup to the bench. And so you're getting him, getting a lot of shots with that second unit. Whereas when he's playing with the starters, he only had about a 19% usage rate. So still very volatile because the minutes aren't guaranteed and it's still Kelly Oubre. But I think at 4,400 in the role that he has right now with the rotations that the Hornets are running, there's still a very high ceiling.
So no priorities from this game, but a couple decent options is what you're saying, specifically from the Knicks?
Yeah, pretty much.
Milwaukee and Boston. Let's talk about this one then. You've got the Milwaukee Bucks coming into this one with a probable Giannis Antetokounmpo. Chris Middleton and Brook Lopez remain out once again. They're still 2-point favorites against Boston, 213 total. And for what it's worth, you're missing Jaylen Brown on the other side of this game, which evens it up, I assume, a little bit. With Giannis being, just using DraftKings pricing for reference, $12,000 now, Adam. Highest on the slate. You get Jokic at 11.7, Curry at 11.6, Westbrook's up to 11.2, Durant at 11.1, Luca Doncic at 11.1 as well. I mean, dude, some of these guys have seen some pretty intense increases in price point over the past week or so. I assume it's understandable just given that guys like LeBron are out and stuff, but Giannis is $12K now.
Yeah, this is really similar to what we saw on Wednesday, where you're never going to be looking to avoid Giannis in tournaments or any of these guys at the top. But what it does on a slate of this size, there's going to be so many mid-range guys that there are so many mid-range guys that have high ceilings. There's just going to be some that put up big games. And so, like, for example, my lineup that came in second place on Wednesday, I think my most expensive guy was like $7,900. The winning lineup was similar. You get a lot of upside in the mid-range. And when the top tier is priced as expensive as they are, it makes it a lot more difficult to get to them. One of the main reasons that people, typically prefer those stars and scrubs lineups as opposed to more balanced lineups is that when you have guys like that, when that Giannis tier is priced around 11K, that tier is underpriced. And so what's happening like across the slate is you're getting efficient pricing on the mid tier and then underpriced guys at the top and some underpriced guys at the bottom. When you jack up that entire top tier, now they're priced appropriately. And so it forces you more onto balanced builds, I think. So, Giannis clearly fine. He's projected for about 9% ownership. You're not going to be upset if you get to the guy that averages the most fantasy points per minute in the NBA, but I am also not going out of my way to get to him at that price tag.
Are you going out of your way to get to anyone in Milwaukee?
I think Portis still looks pretty good at 6K. He had a really good first half last game and then didn't do anything really in the second half, only played 24 minutes, didn't get his closing rotation, but I think expecting him to play around 30 minutes here still makes sense. He's, around a fantasy point per minute guy with Giannis on the floor since last year. So he still looks okay to me. Holiday, Allen, either of those guys are fine, but nothing that looks like a huge priority to me from the Milwaukee side.
What about Boston? I mean, Jaylen Brown's absence continues here. We know that he's going to be out at least a couple of weeks. He hasn't played since the 4th. So that leaves you with, just to reiterate again, I know it's 11 games, Adam, but still you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. You have 12 players on DraftKings in the $10,000 or more. So I only pointed out again, the state, like, how do you prioritize players when you've got a Tatum at 10,100 against the Bucks? Yeah.
Typically my exposure just sort of ends up flattened to those guys because
okay.
Normally when you're playing a lot of one specific player, the reason is that there's not a lot of alternatives in his price range and or at his position that offer the same range of outcomes. When you have this many guys at the top, you can have your preferences between Tatum, Giannis, Luca, whoever, but you also have to acknowledge that in a one game sample that they're all functionally the same, right. Even though, some look,
and it's not as devastating as being wrong where it's a slate where you have two of them and you have to pick between one of the two or two of the three. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just, they're like Giannis is the best, right? In fantasy points per minute. But when you're basically looking at it as Giannis versus the field, like he's still going to lose a ton. And so when the field gets, to be like 10 other guys or whatever it is, it's just really difficult to prioritize them. So, Tatum, I think looks good. He's averaged 1.25 DraftKings points per minute without Brown on the floor this year, 33.1% usage rate. That's in line with what he did last year as well. He's reasonably priced at 10-1, I think. So, I don't mind getting to him, but I don't think he's, drastically underpriced either. We have him projected for 10% ownership on DraftKings, 7.5% chance of being in the optimal lineup. So, ownership pretty much where it should be, I think.
Yeah, if you look at it, there's really no no high-end top shelf players that are projected inside the top 15 right now. So
in terms of optimal percentage?
No, sorry, just in terms of ownership
okay.
Right now. Yeah, in terms of ownership, there's Anthony Davis is pulling the highest projected ownership at 11%. Is it going to be that spread out among these guys tonight?
I think so. I mean, that's what we saw on Wednesday. Like, you had a lot of ownership go to some mid-range guys. Rubio was like 50% owned. Portis was 40% owned. But at the top, Giannis was like 7%. All of those guys were just pretty low owned because of the pricing.
You like anything else for Boston?
I think Schroeder at 6,200 still looks pretty good. Wasn't great the other day, but there are more minutes available for him with Brown out. He played 34.1 minutes. Marcus Smart had a good game finally. He's obviously not as high as high a usage guy as Schroeder or Horford or Tatum, but 5,100 playing 34 minutes or so is a decent value. Horford has been really good this year, only played about 24 minutes last game. Could see him bounce back here. So this is another team where like I don't think there's anybody that jumps out as a priority, but I do think that really just mixing these guys into lineups makes a lot of sense because all of Tatum, Horford, Schroeder, Williams, Smart, even Richardson project, like solid options.
Suave, thank you for the super chase. This first time crunching 15 lineups on Fantasy Cruncher Pro for FanDuel. Any advice? Adam, what would be your one piece of advice for someone crunching and learning? We have the Discord channel with the premium office hours. If you're a sub, that would be a lot better than an hour-long show. But since he's super chat, if you have one piece of advice for someone crunching, is there anything that really stands out to not make that mistake or make sure you do?
Just play around with it and pay attention to like what your settings are doing because, and I mean, it all depends on like what contests you're playing, what you're trying to do. Like if you're using it to play cash games, then you're going to want, just your top projected lineups. But since you said you're crunching 15, I assume you're playing some sort of tournament. I think you probably should, like use some level of randomness so that you get like a mix of players, but crunch more than 15 lineups and then go through those 15 lineups and, figure out which ones you want to play, whether it's by paying attention to projected ownership or, whatever it is you're looking for in your lineups. But I would say crunch more than 15 and then narrow it down.
All right. Fair enough. So Detroit the other day beat up on Houston. They beat them by 8 on the road. I think I mentioned to you about, I was like, I'm just going to hammer these overstock props on these guys because Houston's that bad right now. Like, dude, that team is absolutely awful. So is Detroit, but they still pulled a win off. And we've had good pricing on them for quite some time. Cade Cunningham's price has come up. He's got Cleveland today. The Cavaliers right now, where are they in defensive rating? I think they're towards the bottom. I thought they were middle. They're 12. Okay. 12 in defensive rating. I feel like they actually haven't been that bad this year, but Cunningham's getting, 30 minutes per night. Usage is up. Peripherals are, leave something to be desired. Is 5,600 on him viable? And is there anybody for Detroit in this? Detroit Cleveland game is not one you want to watch unless you have some type of fantasy investment.
Yeah. I mean, I think Cunningham's
202 total.
What'd you say?
There's a 202 total on.
Yeah, not a particularly Cleveland's slow too. They're like 25th in pace this year. Cunningham at 5,600, I think definitely still viable. The usage is there. He is getting some rebound and assist opportunities. He's dealt with foul trouble the last couple of games that have kind of capped his minutes a little bit, but he is getting to a price point where I don't anticipate, jamming him in like to the extent that I did the other day. He was my highest owned guy against Houston at 5,200. Now you have the price tag coming up a little bit. You have a less favorable matchup. Still certainly going to get there, but the pricing is starting to get a little bit more expensive. One spot on Detroit that I do think is really interesting is Isaiah Stewart at 4,300. Giving up your center spot does suck, but Kelly Olynyk's out. Stewart only played about 15 minutes last game, but he had 5 fouls over that span. If he's able to stay out of foul trouble here, there's nobody really to take minutes away from him. One of the issues that you've had with Stewart this season is that Kelly Olynyk so frequently plays well off the bench that Olynyk ends up in the closing lineup over him. I think that's less likely to happen with somebody like Trey Lyles. So I think that if Stewart can avoid foul trouble, he ends up looking like a good value here. Similarly, Lyles at 3,200 steps into a bigger role, most likely without Olynyk. So either one of those guys, I think, makes some sense. Cunningham, Grant, Bay are all fine, but I think the Stewart Lyles pieces are where I'm most interested.
So with Colin Sexton out, I guess you would assume that some of these price tags would have increased a little bit more. I don't know. I'll defer to you on that. But in 199 minutes without Sexton on the floor this season, Rubio's averaging 1.24 DraftKings points per minute, which I think is a pretty solid number at this price point. He's coming off a game where he played 28 minutes, I think it was. And then you have somebody like Darius Garland, who's also pulling some ownership, should be pretty favorable in a spot like this. His minutes are without Sexton this year. He's played 161 minutes, only 0.93 DraftKings points per minute. But you just know that with Sexton off the floor, a lot more responsibilities going to a guy like Garland, and you're locking him in for essentially 35 plus minutes if this game stays close. So are you buying into the ownership on these two guys tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I think they both look really good. Rubio has played extremely well this year. Overall, 1.13 DraftKings points per minute, but a 24.7% usage rate, 36.5% assist percentage. I played 28 minutes last game. I still think that there's the possibility he plays more tonight because, you were seeing him play 28 to 30 minutes off the bench, even with Sexton. So, potentially could get a couple of extra minutes. I think 5,700 for him in a good matchup still looks really good. Garland's fine. Like you said, the playing time for Garland is good. And Sexton being out does open up some usage. But I do think that you have to keep in mind, last year when Sexton would sit, Garland became a really, really good play because there was nobody really filling in for Sexton that did anything. When you're replacing a lot of Sexton with Rubio, who has a higher usage rate than Garland this year and is going to have the ball in his hands a lot, it's not the same sort of upgrade for Garland. So the minutes are nice, but I think that he's going to play enough minutes alongside Rubio that it's tough to really expect his per minute production to really increase all that much. So, it's a good matchup. There's a lot of minutes there, but I'm a little more cautious on Garland than I am Rubio.
Anybody else you like here, maybe in the front court?
Yeah, Jared Allen playing huge minutes without Kevin Love. He played 38 minutes last game. He's now played, I think, at least 35 in every game that Love has been out. Markkanen being out means more rebound opportunities as well. So you're seeing him produce at a high level. Now you have a good matchup against Detroit. I think Allen looks really good even at the rising price tag. Evan Mobley at 7,100 is fine. You expect him to play 36, 37 minutes if he can avoid foul trouble. But I think the priorities for me here are Rubio and Allen as the first two. Okay.
Top plays from this entire game?
Rubio, Allen, Stewart, Lyles.
Rubio, Allen, Stewart, Lyles. Okay, let's talk about Portland then. Dame Lillard going up against this Houston Rockets team that I just talked about. They are dead last in steals against and, of course, turnovers. They're 29th in blocks against. So when you look at all of the other metrics, yeah, of course they're important. They're not a good team. They don't shoot well. Houston defensively is, I think, 20th. They're bottom 10 in the league. They're barely scoring 100 points per 100 possessions. And they also play at 103 per 48, 103 possessions per 48. Adam, that's second fastest in the league, essentially tied right there with the Lakers. So they make for as good a matchup as you could really think about, not just from a pace perspective, but they're so sloppy with the basketball. They get blocked at the rim. It can turn an average game for an opponent into a really good performance. At the same time, though, Damian Lillard he doesn't have a 50 fantasy point game this year. It has to improve at some point, but on such a deep slate, is it worth taking the risk today against Houston? I want to say yes, but again, what do we think here of Dame in the backcourt for Portland in such a good spot?
Yeah, it's just so difficult to prioritize him at that price tag because there are so many other options. So, not only do you have to have him do well, but you still have to have him beat that entire other group of guys, really, to be glad that you rostered him. I think at 8,500 on FanDuel, that's where I'd be looking to get to Dame. On DraftKings, he's just really, really expensive. I do expect him to start shooting better going forward. 3-point shooting's been down across the league, but he's been exceptionally bad. I expect that to get better, and you're going to get some ceiling games in there. But he's not on DraftKings. You're not getting any sort of a price discount for his poor play so far. So it's tough to get there. McCollum's priced up as well. He's playing huge minutes. He's got a similar usage rate to Lillard this year. He's having his minutes staggered again, which is always good to see, but still difficult to prioritize that price tag. As it's up to 8,200. So I think Lillard, McCollum, they're both nice, but going to be kind of tough to get to, I think.
Anybody else from Portland, maybe in the front court, some wing players that stand out? Because it's such a good spot. You hate to waste it. But like you said, it's hard to prioritize everybody on an 11-game slate.
Yeah, I mean, like Nurkic at 7K against Houston is really, really tempting. The problem is just that he's not playing a lot of minutes, even in games where he's not in foul trouble that are competitive. You're getting 26, 27 minutes on an 11-game slate. That's really, really difficult to want to get to. Even if he, produces at a higher level than normal and, gets, let's say, 1.5 fantasy points per minute, he's going to give you a good but not, elite score. And there's always the downside that, he doesn't get that many minutes. So it's still a pretty risky play. You have cheap price tags on Simons and Covington. Covington's been atrocious this year, but should play a lot of minutes here in a good matchup. So I don't mind using Covington as value. I don't mind Simons as value. You potentially could get some more minutes from him tonight as well. So I think that either of those pieces, for value are okay. If Norman Powell sits, he's listed as questionable right now. If he sits, I think it would open up more for both of those guys.
Do you like anything from Houston? The game does have a 222.5 total, which is pretty solid, all things considered, right? I mean, it's not that bad.
Yeah, and I like the playing time that Houston's starters have been getting for the most part this year. You got another 36 minutes last game from Porter. Wood played 37. Jalen Green played 38. The fantasy production isn't the best. Like you said, this is not a very good team, but they do have a lot of offensive talent. It doesn't always come through, but the ceiling is there for these guys. Christian Wood, Wood and Şengün, the only guys on the team averaging over a fantasy point per minute, but you have a 22.7% usage rate for Jalen Green. He's going to have games where he gets hot, I would think, and takes more shots. Kevin Porter Jr. only averaging 0.87 DraftKings points per minute, but he has a 24% usage rate, a 26% assist percentage, and like I said, playing 36 minutes or so in competitive games gives you a pretty nice ceiling. So, nothing that really stands out, but mixing those guys in, I think, gives you a good ceiling. Jae'Sean Tate as well, 5,300. He's been a good fantasy producer this year, 0.91 DraftKings points per minute. Doesn't do any one thing particularly well, but has a 13% rebounding percentage, has a 19% usage rate, and is likely to play around 30 minutes. So this is another team sort of like Boston, sort of like I don't remember who the other team, the Knicks maybe, but where there's several guys that look good. No one of them that looks like a standout, must play type guy, but just a team where I would expect to be mixing Houston in, one guy from Houston into a lot of lineups.
What if Norman Powell's out? He's dealing with that bicep injury.
I think that would open up potentially more minutes for Simons. Maybe you see a little bit more from Covington, but also you would probably get Nasir Little sliding into the starting lineup. I believe that's what they did the last time he sat. So you would get more minutes there, potentially more minutes from Larry Nance Jr., who played 26.5 last game. Not saying more than 26.5, but just noting that he actually played a lot last game for once. So I think that if Powell's out, it doesn't do a lot to change per minute production for players because he's not a high usage guy, but it does open up more playing time for some value guys like Little, Nance, Simons.
Okay. Yeah, I guess you're going to come across a lot of spots on this slate that are good spots, but maybe not priorities. And it's kind of bared out when you look at ownership, right? There's no one's getting like Andre Drummond, on what was it, Tuesday or Monday type ownership, right? Like no one's even close to, we don't have anyone above 25% right now on DraftKings.
Yeah. The at least right now, the way ownership's shaking out is much different than
right. Injuries could change a lot.
Yeah, but it's much different than the other day where this is more of like a normal 11-game slate where ownership still matters, but it's all relative. And when the highest owned guys are 25% owned, it just the decisions aren't quite as difficult as when you have 50% ownership going to somebody like Rubio.
All right, let's talk about Phoenix and Memphis. The Phoenix Suns on the road against the Grizzlies. You've got them as 1.5 point dogs right now, 221.5 total. We can start in the backcourt here. And again, I feel like probably going to get some similar answers to what we've had, that there's some decent options here, maybe some like low double-digit ownership guys you want to get 10 or so % exposure to. But when it comes to Booker and Paul, those price points are up quite a bit. What do you do with those guys? What do you do with some of the lesser priced options for Phoenix? I would imagine there's no priorities set right now for the Suns.
There's not. Booker and Paul obviously give you high ceilings, but they're also pretty expensive. The
Ayton is doubtful Ayton is doubtful to play tonight for what it's
I was gonna say the front court's where it gets interesting. You had Frank Kaminsky have a monster game last time out. He's 5,500 on DraftKings, so it's still tough to get there. But McGee's 4,100. And what we've seen for the most part with Ayton out is McGee's getting the starts. If he doesn't get in foul trouble, we saw him play 26 minutes. He's been getting in foul trouble a lot, and that's leading to more playing time for Kaminsky. I still like McGee at 4,100. Only played 16 and a half minutes last game, but was in foul trouble. As I mentioned, he picked up 3 in the first half, picked up his 4th a minute and 23 seconds into the third quarter. Picked up his 5th in the at the start of the fourth quarter. So if he's not in foul trouble, you can see him play mid-20s minutes here. He's well over a fantasy point per minute guy, and he's only 4,100. So I like going to McGee. At the elevated price tag for Kaminsky, I don't anticipate chasing that last game.
You and I talked about this, though, on the Tuesday show where we had, maybe it was Monday, where we had said, like, McGee at a discounted price point could be the answer over Kaminsky if the ownership is crazy, specifically on sites like Yahoo. And he ended up outproducing Kaminsky by 7 fantasy points at a much cheaper price point and on a lot of sites. So I hear what you're saying. And the thing now is the price gap has become significant between those. And it sounds like you're saying you do not anticipate Kaminsky getting another 32 minutes tonight.
Right. Like, it's possible that he does, but I think what happens a lot of the times in a situation like this, where it's entirely dependent on what happens in that particular game, I think people have a tendency to look too much at the final result and then just decide that's going to happen again. When Kaminsky's been getting the bulk of the minutes with Ayton out, but every time it's been McGee's in foul trouble, or McGee, one game he got hurt early on, and then so Kaminsky checked in early. We haven't seen him really intentionally be given minutes over McGee. He got really hot last game, obviously. So in addition to the foul trouble for McGee, he was going to stay out there. But I think the point here is that going into any one game, it's like a 24 minute split between these two. And then it depends on whether or not McGee gets in foul trouble if Kaminsky gets more. So with Kaminsky's price tag rising as the result of basically variance in the last couple of games, I'm still interested in going to McGee because we haven't really seen him be on the good side of that yet.
Do you like anything on the other side from Memphis?
Ja Morant's been great this year. He's also extremely expensive. So, if I can get him into some lineups, that's fine, but that's a healthy price tag. I think Jaren Jackson Jr. at 6,200, still a spot that I like getting to. Memphis had said that they were starting to get more comfortable using him at center. Steven Adams then played 28 minutes last game, but I think that this is a spot where you could see Jackson get quite a bit of run at the 5. You have Kaminsky as the backup center on Phoenix. I think it would make sense for Jackson to play center with the second unit for Memphis. So I think he's got a very high ceiling. I think that someone like Kyle Anderson, likely to play 24 minutes or so, but only $4,300 gives you a nice ceiling as well. So another team where I think there's several pieces that you can get to, but not one single guy that really stands out.
Okay. So I guess right now we're just waiting on the Ayton news when it comes to this game.
Yeah. And, assuming that he's going to sit.
Yeah. I don't usually when players are doubtful, unless they're upgraded to questionable, which happens way more than we'd like, they usually sit out. It's funny though, because we've gone through a few games with pretty decent totals, and it sounds to me like through the first 5 games, I don't know if anyone's really a stone lock for you or a real priority yet. It's just like, hey, these guys on these teams are in good spots and you want pieces of them, but you shouldn't be making a concerted effort to make sure that they're in all of your lineups.
Right. Exactly.
PrizePicks, baby. If you haven't checked it out yet, I don't know what you're doing. PrizePicks.com, go to the App Store, go to the Google Play Store, whichever one it is. Daily prop-based contests where you don't have to worry about sharks or optimizers or mass entries, none of that stuff. And they've got an insane amount of sports. If there's a sport out there that they have it over at PrizePicks. What you're doing is you're picking prop lineups. There's no juice on either side. You're just betting or taking the over or the under, and you're putting it into a 2, 3, 4, or 5 player lineup. Okay. You put it into a 5-player lineup and you hit all 5, you can 10x your entry fee. But the coolest thing is, unlike your traditional books, where if you miss out on that 5th leg of a parlay and it's the last one, the late game, you need it and you're going to cash big, you miss, bust your parlay and there's nothing left. You don't win anything. On PrizePicks, if you hit 4 or 5, you're still 2xing your money. You still get money back if you 3 out of 5. And even if you miss 2 of those legs, or you could just do 4, you could do a power play on 4, where if you hit all 4, you get 10x, but you get nothing if you hit 3 or 4. There's so many different ways to play over at PrizePicks. The format's awesome. You get $100 up to $100 deposit match bonus if you use the promo code Awesemo, AWESEMO, when you sign up. And you can do cross-sport entries too. You hear Greg and Eric talk about it all the time on the PrizePicks show after Live Before Lock, where they'll go and they'll give you 3 NBA picks and then an MMA pick and a PGA pick. You can throw them all into the same 5-player lineup. Really cool stuff. The format's great. It's an amazing way to build your bankroll and not go bust betting parlays, trying to hit that big one every day on your traditional book. So download it in the App Store, the Google Play Store, or go to prizepicks.com and use our free player prop tools to help you make the best decisions here. And we have all the free player prop tools, and we have oddshopper.com, where you can literally find the best spots with one click of a button by sorting it to expected win rate, right? You're not worried about ROI on a site like PrizePicks. You're just looking for expected win rate. Sort by that, use that to find the best props over at PrizePicks, put them in your lineup. I mean, it's a win-win. We have all of the necessary tools to put you in an amazing spot to win consistently over there. Use the promo code Awesemo. Get up to $100 when you sign up. Download it. Go to prizepicks.com, whichever you prefer, and start winning today. All right, let's talk about the next one here on the list. We've got the Sacramento Kings and the OKC Thunder, 218 total. Kings laying 4.5 on the road here. Now, from an ownership standpoint, you do have a couple guys from OKC that are popping. I don't see a ton popping from the Sacramento Kings.
No, but this is a game where I do think that you could just get a lot of fantasy points. I mean, 2 teams that don't play a ton of defense. Sacramento 24th in defensive rating this year. Oklahoma City's been okay. They're 14th. I don't really know that continues though. So I think that it's just a spot where the ceiling, I think, is pretty high for a lot of these guys. From the Kings side, De'Aaron Fox finally had a good game last time out. I do think that if Tyrese Halliburton ends up sitting again, it boosts Fox's potential production. Replacing Halliburton with Hield, it's still a pretty high usage guy, but I think, maybe you see a little bit more from Fox. Harrison Barnes at 7,400 is a pretty good price tag. I'm really interested in Rashawn Holmes at 6,700. He's struggled the last couple of games, but overall this season, he's been really, really good. And this isn't an Oklahoma City front court that scares me at all. So I like Fox, Barnes, Holmes in tournaments. If Halliburton sits, Hield would play more minutes as well.
Someone said, why can't you just admit that, where is it? Why can't you just say that Kaminsky is better than McGee? It has zero to do with any of that. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, I replied to it in chat, but it doesn't matter who you think is better until you see Phoenix giving Kaminsky minutes intentionally, as is based on what we've seen so far. Kaminsky gets more minutes if and when McGee is in foul trouble.
Right.
But if he's not in foul trouble, there's nothing that suggests it's going to be anything other than 24 minutes for both of them or something.
Yeah. And look, honestly, McGee from a per minute standpoint is better than Kaminsky. From a fantasy standpoint, if you gave both of them 30 minutes in a game locked in, you said they're both playing 30 minutes, McGee is going to grade out better than Kaminsky at the same price point.
Good.
No, I'm saying, but none of that matters if you're not factoring in ownership, if you're not factoring in price point, and of course, like you said, foul trouble and minutes, which is what you're there for.
Yeah, and the other thing is what happens is, because Kaminsky has had a couple of good games recently, the price tag goes up. If he were 4,100, if they're both 4,100, I'd be saying don't play them in the same lineup, but play both of them, because chances are one of them is going to beat that price tag. But when you have Kaminsky priced for what he's been doing lately, it makes it so he's difficult to get to. McGee's price tag has stayed low because he's happened to be in foul trouble a few games. So he just ends up being the one that looks more appealing because of the salary difference.
Yeah. And by the way, McGee has a phenomenal ceiling for a guy that could play 20 minutes and give you 40. We've seen it a million times. And
he played 26 in the game that he wasn't in foul trouble. So I think that's kind of the thing too, is people have a bias toward McGee because they think that he just is incapable of playing a lot of minutes. He played 26 minutes 3 games ago. So the minutes are there if he's able to avoid foul trouble here.
Right. It's just a little bit more volatile. He is cheaper though, which is what we talked about. Anyway, the Oklahoma City Thunder, they're getting some ownership today, Adam. And obviously so much of this just comes from the fact that one, they're not a very good basketball team. And two, a lot of these price tags are low, right? And on the opposite side of this one, you've got a Sacramento Kings team that is not particularly great either from a defensive side. They have a 110 defensive rating, and they're playing at a top 10 pace. So it does make for a decent matchup against them when you start getting guys like Baisley at his price, Lou Dort at his price, even Giddey getting a little bit of ownership today. Are you feeling the Thunder?
Yeah, I think they look good here. It's a good spot for them. Gilgeous-Alexander plays a ton of minutes if the game's competitive, and this one is relatively likely to be. So 8,800 for him, I think is fine. Giddey at 6,400, you're expecting 30, 31 minutes. He's been over a fantasy point per minute guy this year, leads the team with a 34.1% assist percentage. So I think he's fine. Baisley is still inexpensive, only 4,900 for him. You've seen the playing time ramped up a bit recently, played 33.6 minutes against the Pelicans last game. Earlier in the year, it was kind of difficult to get him to 30 minutes. Now you're seeing him play 30 plus minutes more frequently. So I think he looks like a pretty good value. He's averaging 0.9 DraftKings points per minute this year. So I think, just getting to guys from the Pelicans, I think this is a good spot. I think there's some favorable pricing here as well. Yeah.
Right.
Thunder,
okay. Yeah. I wasn't sure if you made a quick pivot there.
No, they played the Pelicans last game.
Gotcha. Okay, so the Brooklyn Nets and the Pelicans today, as we move to that, 211.5 total. Nets laying 7.5. I mean, the Pels have just been awful as well. I'm unsure of some of the statuses on this one. Brandon Ingram has not played in since the end of October. So that's pretty.
Yesterday.
He did practice. Yeah, I still don't know if he's going to be active. I'm assuming he's been close. So. It looks like he should be there relatively soon, but we'll start with the Nets. I mean, Durant's price has come up pretty considerably. James Harden is still priced high, and he's been, just okay, right? Like you would have expected more out of these guys with Kyrie Irving off the floor through the first almost month of the season.
Yeah, for sure. Harden, we've obviously talked about it a lot. He's still producing at a good level. He's averaging 1.31 DraftKings points per minute, but it's just not the same level of production that you typically get from Harden. And I'm not like he's still capable of having big games, obviously, but I'm not just like jamming him in the lineups waiting for it to happen. He only has a 25% usage rate this year. Durant's usage rate is 7 points higher. He's got a 40% assist percentage, which is good, but it's not like it's a crazy high number. Durant at 27.5%. Harden's rebounding rate is about the same as Durant's. So it's just difficult for me to look at Harden and want to pay this price tag. I think that you're essentially just paying for the hope that James Harden, just goes out there and has a massive game, which he certainly can, but you're not, he's overpriced for what you're going to get on an average basis by, I think, a pretty big gap.
Oh man. Can you get to anything else ever for Brooklyn anymore unless they're just egregiously underpriced?
Aldridge is playing really, really well. The issue is that he takes up a center spot, and it's difficult to expect him to play more than, 24 minutes or so. He played 22 minutes against Orlando. So he's one of those guys where he's likely to give you good production for his salary at 4,100, but it's difficult in 22 to 24 minutes for him to put up like a raw point score that you have to have on a slate of this size. And there's just so much opportunity cost per lineup position. So that's the issue with Aldridge. I think he's a good value option here based on, the way he's been playing, the minutes he's been getting, but still where he's center only eligible, it's the opportunity cost is still really high. So I think Aldridge is fine. Durant is always fine, but he's priced up to where I would rather just go to some cheaper guys.
What about the Pels, man? Still no Zion, and he's got to work his ass back in the shape. Brandon Ingram, questionable here. We'll see where that heads. I mean, like you said, he's practicing, so there's a good chance he'll play. And then you're going to have some players that are priced up because of Brandon Ingram's absence that can make this team, pretty unappealing for the most part. If Brandon Ingram's in today, what do you do with that?
So if Ingram's in, it lowers the projection for basically everyone else on the Pelicans. So Ingram his status does matter a lot. Jonas Valanciunas at 9,300, even if Ingram's in, Valanciunas is going to look okay. He's still, rebounds at a really high rate. He's still playing a lot of minutes. He's still a high usage guy, but his usage rate, his assist percentage, his rebounding percentage, they all increase without Ingram. So Valanciunas is fine if Ingram's in. He starts to look more like a priority if Ingram is out. Same can be said for guys like Graham and Alexander Walker. They're reasonably priced at 6,300 on DraftKings for Graham, 6K for Alexander Walker. Alexander Walker showed the ceiling he has last time out, like 60 something DraftKings points. Not going to do that frequently, of course, but the upside for him is there. Devontae Graham is a good fantasy producer as well, but there's more usage to go around for both of these guys if Ingram sits. So if Ingram's in, they're reasonable options. You can play a little bit of them. If Ingram's out, they both look better, and I would be swapping to more of them if we get news that Ingram's going to sit.
All right. Hey, we got free content on the site today as well. A lot, actually. Adam, every day, his deep dive article is free. It's really good, comprehensive, will get you exactly where you need to go if you're trying to read it. It's better than any paid article you're going to find out there, no doubt. When will that be out? Like, what do you come out, 1 or 2 o'clock?
Yeah, around there.
Yeah, so check that out. Seriously, every day, make it a part of your process. NFL Top Stacks tool is free. Coming up for this Sunday, NBA ownership rankings are free, NHL ownership projections, and MMA rankings. So all of that stuff free today. That's a ton of stuff. You don't need to have a subscription or any of that. But if you do want to join us, get the tools by the #1 ranked DFS player out there. Top Stacks, ownership, boom, bust, lineup builder, all of that stuff. Use the promo code NBA Strategy Show. Get you 25% off your first week of everything on the site. You name it, right? Like literally every sport, not just basketball, football, hockey, PGA, MMA, NASCAR. I don't think NASCAR's around anymore, but all of that. Check it out. Use the promo code NBA Strategy Show, all caps, all one word, NBA.com/join. If you want to get 25% off your first week, do that. But yeah, check the free content out. If you don't want to sign up yet, you don't have to. There's plenty of free content out there as well. Dallas and San Antonio. Luca Doncic coming in, another one of these guys priced north of 11K, Adam. They're right now 2.5-point favorites, 217 total against the Spurs. And just looking kind of at the boom bust tool today, which is already updated, Luca has a 10% boom rating, 61% bust rating. Man, that seems so out of the ordinary for someone like Luca, but it's definitely been one of those seasons that has been quiet, to say the least.
Yeah, he's struggled this year. I mean, 1.38 DraftKings points per minute.
Which is good for anyone else.
Right. It's like James Harden. Everyone's talking about how much Harden sucks, and he's still producing at a very, very good level from a DFS standpoint, but he's not living up to the price tag. He's not living up to what he's supposed to be doing from a fantasy standpoint. And even more so than that, even if you just assume that Luka's going to end up being what he's always been, it's still just tough to get to that salary range today. There's so many good plays. In the mid-range that you're just typically going to get higher ceiling lineups, I think, by not prioritizing these guys at the top because, they're going to project for 55 DraftKings points, give or take. But even if they go for 60 or 65, obviously that doesn't hurt you, but you're going to be able to find that for cheaper price tags. It's just a matter of, getting lucky on the right guy, basically. But with this many options and the elevated price tags here, it's just really difficult to prioritize, even before you consider the fact that he has not played very well this year.
I know, it's crazy. I mean, I guess the problem is with so many other guys up top is where do you? It's a tough question so early, but on such a stacked slate where you have 1, 2, 3, 4, you have 7 guys above 11K, like. Is there any way you can look at Luca and be like, you know what, I'm really trying to make him someone that makes a difference on this slate today? It seems tough, man.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really see it. To be fair, I don't necessarily see it for any of these guys at the top because they are so expensive. But if I were going to, I think if I were going to, like force in guys near the top, I would really want to be getting to Giannis. I'd want to be getting to Jokic. These are the guys that produce the best fantasy point per minute rates. You have Curry, who is just, capable of going out and knocking down 10 threes anytime he steps on the floor. So he's someone that, is really, really volatile, but it's Giannis and Jokic are really expensive, but if I'm paying up, I really want to be getting to those guys just because they're on a completely different level than everyone else.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, Curry has that ability to go for 40, but like 40 fantasy points, and then the next day rip off 85. And and the difference between him and guys like Harden and Luca is he has done that multiple times this season already, the 65 plus games.
Yeah, well, like the difference is Curry's not playing with Kevin Durant. You're never going to have a game. James Harden can play great. You're going to have games where James Harden has, plays better than normal, but you're never going to have a game where Kevin Durant's just like, yeah, man, I'm just going to chill over here in the corner and I'm just not going to touch the ball. You're going to have games where Steph Curry is just like, okay, Poole, like get away from me. You're not getting the ball today. Like Wiggins, go sit on the bench. Like this is my game. So the ceiling is just easier for him to reach.
Yeah. I mean, like when Andrew Wiggins is the guy you're worried about most outside of Curry, it's not an issue.
Right. He has a bunch of complementary pieces and he also, one of the best guys, one of the best players on the team, Draymond, like his role is to just get Steph the ball and let him shoot. So, it's Steph has a bunch of complementary pieces around him that put him in a situation where he can just have ridiculous games. Harden, obviously Durant is better than anyone on Golden State, but Harden's complementary piece is someone that cuts into his fantasy production as opposed to, elevating it.
Yeah. Kristaps Porzingis, dude, we know he was not happy after last year, right? He doesn't want to play second fiddle. Too bad, guy. But at the same time, like he has looked a little better recently, right? There's been a few games where you're like, oh no, the old Kristaps Porzingis is rearing his head. But then you see this vintage New York Knicks Porzingis at times. Look, he's a big man, but he doesn't really play like a big man. He's a fine rebounder. He's a decent shot blocker, but he's not super physical. He's someone that takes a lot of threes, and that's what you kind of need from him. Like if the shot volume on Porzingis is down, you're banking on blocks, which is cool, but also on rebounds. And Luca's such a good rebounder that, he's led the team in rebound rate for the past 2 years. So I get that Porzingis is kind of hit or miss, but he's pulling a lot of ownership again today. I think he's like the third highest projected owned player on the slate, man. Yeah.
And I think so. Porzingis is really interesting because he's like the epitome of a guy that I love rostering. I love rostering at low ownership and hate rostering when he's popular because he is just hit or miss. He's second fiddle to Luca at pretty much everything. He's a good fantasy producer, 1.13 DraftKings points per minute this year. That's in line with what he's done in the past. 27% usage rate is good, 13.8% rebounding percentage. I think he's a good play at 6,600. I thought he was a much better play on Wednesday when I was able to get him at 1% owned and, at 6,800 or whatever he was. I really like that. Today at 20%, I think he's fine, but I think it's likely that I mix so like where I'm going to this price range, I get to some Jaren Jackson at lower ownership. I get to, there's just plenty of comparable guys that you can go to. So I think that Porzingis is a good play. I think that relative to some of these other options, he's a little bit overowned.
Yeah, dude, I think he is too. He's got a 14% rebound rate. It's fine. It's fine. He's not going to assist well. He's got a decent block rate, and he does have a 28% usage rate. So things are at least trending up from where they were last year. Yeah,
like he's good, but the way I view it is like, to me, the names here don't really matter. Like Porzingis is projected for 20% ownership at 6,600. Jaren Jackson is projected for 7%. If you told me Jackson was 20% and Porzingis was 7%, I would love Porzingis. But as is, if everyone else wants to take Porzingis, I will take guys like Jackson and Evan Mobley and some of these just lower owned guys that have an almost identical range of outcomes.
And for what it's worth, I'm 100% in agreement with you. I'm just pointing out like why he's getting ownership at that price point is all.
I think Porzingis, I haven't built a cash lineup. Obviously it's really early, but Porzingis, I wouldn't at all be surprised if I play him in cash. It's a situation. I'm not trying to talk anyone off of Porzingis, but I do think that particular spot is one where it's just going to be easy in tournaments to say, okay, this is where I'm going to plug in a contrarian piece and just go to a lower owned guy that is functionally the same.
I think that makes a ton of sense. Yeah. He's really one of the only chalky guys that we've talked about, and it's such a big slate. So if that's going to be the case with 11 games and so many alternatives, it just makes sense because really what 40 from Porzingis is fine at 6,600, but does it kill you if you don't have him? It really doesn't, or it shouldn't.
there's so many plays in this price range, so many guys that have a similar range of outcomes. This is really similar to the conversation that basically Greg was having on Twitter about Rubio the other night. Like, Rubio was obviously not a bad play at 5,200, but he was 50% owned, and it becomes a situation where, like, there's so many other guys. Even let's say Porzingis goes for, I don't know, 38 fantasy points, right? That's a score that is good for 6,600. It's very likely that there are players within a few $100s of him that go for 45 and that just make his 38 irrelevant. So when you have this many players, it's not, you can't just look at the projection and say, oh, it's a really good, point per dollar projection. He's going to do well for his salary. I don't care what the ownership is, because it's just really unlikely he's actually the top scorer in that price range. And if ownership's going to end up being concentrated on him because he projects a little bit better than the other guys around him, it's just an edge in tournaments to go to the other guys. I'm
with you. Anything else for Dallas? If not, let's talk the Spurs.
I got off of Dallas's pricing. What's Brunson priced at? Has he come up yet?
Brunson on DraftKings is 5,900.
Yeah, that's a tough sell. I've liked him this year, but I think starting to get a little expensive.
Yeah, I mean, he's been floating around there for the past couple of games. He's playing well. I mean, credit the guy, he's playing well. But yeah, that is getting up there a bit, especially with so many games on this slate. The San Antonio Spurs. What are you doing here with guys like DeJounte Murray and Derek White and Keldon Johnson?
The Spurs are pretty interesting to me. DeJounte Murray playing out of his mind this year. He's one of my favorite guys. Like, I think he's really, really good, but he gets it done in so many ways. He's averaging 2.9 steals per 100 possessions. He has an 11.9% rebounding percentage. That's excellent for a guard. 33.5% assist percentage, 24.2% usage rate isn't elite, but it still leads the team. Averaging 1.33 DraftKings points per minute, typically playing around 36 minutes in competitive games. His price tag, like, he's expensive at 9,400, but he actually stands out to me because you have such aggressive pricing on a lot of the top tier guys, like with Morant, for example, being moved to 10K. But then you have Murray at 9,400 actually decreasing a little bit in salary. So I think Murray's really interesting to me. His projected ownership right now is only 2% on DraftKings. If that holds, I expect to be getting a lot of DeJounte Murray at that price tag. Outside of him, you have the center rotation, which has kind of been up in the air without Pirtle. Darius Young at 5,700, Eubanks at 4,700. Either of those guys are okay, but not priorities. I expect that you get around 22 minutes from Eubanks. I expect that you get 24, 25 minutes or so from Young. Keldon Johnson played well last game. He's expensive though, so it's kind of tough to get there. DeJounte Murray is the guy that really stands out to me.
Atlanta and Denver. Denver, by the way, without Jokic. It was with Jokic. That game against Miami had the lowest total on the slate. You and I talked about it a couple of days ago, and I think the Heat were favored by several points. They got smoked in that one, and Denver lost Jokic for a game. He's back for this one. We'll talk about Atlanta first, though. The Atlanta Hawks in Denver, in that gravity, Adam, are getting 4.5 points, 215.5 total. This is kind of another spot that I've been waiting to ask you about is Trey Young. He's another one of those guys where it's like, all right, you look at his like the average production and you say that's not bad, but the ceiling on Trey Young has been modest at best this year. Just like lump him in with James Harden and Luca Doncic in that respect.
Yeah, and the thing for me with Young is as long as somebody like DeJounte Murray is not getting ownership, I don't really care about Trey Young. I would rather just be playing DeJounte Murray. Right. He's producing at a higher level this year. Young's been fine, 1.25 DraftKings points per minute, but I think the matchup is more difficult. And yeah, like it's one thing if Murray's ownership were to come up, then it's like, okay, well, I'll play some Trey Young because he still has a massive ceiling. But I just think right now I would just rather be wherever I could get to Young, I would rather be going to Murray, I think.
Would you be rather going to anyone for Atlanta?
Kind of interested in Capella at 7K. We've seen his playing time increase recently, especially against teams that have, bigger centers. He played 34.5 minutes against Utah the other day. His fantasy production this year hasn't been great, only 1.01 DraftKings points per minute. Usage rate is down to 14.8%. But if he's going to play 34 or 35 minutes at 7K here to try and slow down Jokic, which I'm not saying he's going to, but, to attempt, he's going to look like a decent option, I think.
Okay. How about on the opposite side when it comes to Denver? Nikola Jokic, of course, super high priced. Man, I watched that video a lot, and to be honest, kind of enjoyed it.
The Morris one?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of enjoyed it. Didn't get any less pleasurable. It's Morris, man. Why is everyone acting like Morris didn't throw an elbow into his rib cage?
Yeah, I don't know how Markieff Morris became the victim in this. Yeah, it was a cheap shot for sure.
Oh, totally a cheap shot. And he's a huge dude. Of course it was a cheap shot.
Yeah, but it's not like Jokic just walked down the floor and just chucked Morris for no reason.
No, man. It was just instantaneous fury from Jokic when he took that shot. So you knew it was a shot. Well, I'm saying when he took that shot from Morris, you knew he felt it because
it's not like he planned. There was no oh, I'm gonna retaliate next time. It was his reaction to just punt more to launch him across the floor.
Yeah, exactly. All right. What are you doing with Jokic?
So real quick, just to mention it because I forgot with Atlanta, Bogdanovic and Hunter are both questionable. If one or both sit, you see more playing time for Herter, potentially for Reddish. Those guys end up looking like pretty good values. For now, I'm assuming they're in, so that's why I hadn't mentioned them. But as far as Jokic goes, he's in that Giannis category for me where, I kind of touched on it before. It's still not, I don't love paying that salary for anybody today, but if I am going to pay up, I really want to be getting to Jokic or Giannis just because they both produce 1.7 DraftKings points per minute. Jokic is projected for 9% ownership, 8.5% chance of being in the optimal lineup. So, ownership about where it should be, but he just gives you, he offers a different level of production than most of these pay up guys. And so if I am paying up, I really would like it to be for somebody like Jokic. 1.74 DraftKings points per minute this year, leads the team in usage, leads the team in assist percentage, leads the team in rebounding. He's just on a different level than almost anybody else.
Is there anybody with Michael Porter Jr. out still? And I know price points have adjusted for this since he went down earlier in the week. Is there anybody with Porter Jr. out that you think might actually be a solid value option?
I think that it's difficult with Jokic coming back because what the problem is Will Barton's up to 6,900 now. And Barton did have a really good game 2 games ago with Jokic, but there's nothing to really suggest that he's a huge beneficiary here. With Jokic back, he's a 0.9 fantasy point per minute guy without Porter or Murray on the floor alongside Jokic since last year. So Barton's playing a lot of minutes, but that price tag's elevated now. Aaron Gordon doesn't he plays more minutes, but the production is still pretty mediocre. Jeff Green played 34 minutes 2 games ago. He's 3,800. He's okay, but I don't feel comfortable expecting 34 minutes again either. I think it's likely he gets around 30. He's only about a 0.7 fantasy point per minute guy. So playing that last game without Jokic and getting a little bit of an increase in these salaries makes it tough for me to really prioritize getting back to them.
All right. We got 2 games to go, Adam. And on the contrary, coming up next with Alex Baker, and probably heard of him before, Chess is okay. James Gettinger. Chicago, Golden State Warriors. What do you do with Chicago today with Vucevic being out? Sidelined now for a while. Another vaccinated NBA player in the health and safety protocols. So does it mean that because he's vaccinated, he can come back sooner?
He tested positive, so I think he's just.
So it doesn't matter at this point, right?
Yeah, okay. I'm not positive what the rules are, but I
football
think
is 2 negative tests in a 24-hour, 48-hour period, right? And then you can come back.
I think that's what it is in the NBA too, because I know they had said that about Embiid, that he was out for 10 days unless he returns 2 negative tests.
Right. Okay. So anyway, it looks like we know he's out today, so that's kind of all that matters. What are your thoughts on them without Vucevic? He has not been a high usage guy this season, but he is still getting good minutes at a center position that's now voided and has to be filled by someone.
Yeah, and that someone is most likely going to be Tony Bradley, at least for enough minutes to be a good DFS option. He is $3,000 flat. He's projected to be one of the highest owned guys on the slate at 22%. The only negative I have to say with Bradley is that, he is a center, so the opportunity cost is a little bit higher, but he's a solid fantasy producer. It's not like, and you talk about this a lot, cheap center is just kind of being a cheat code. It's not like he's, some random guy off the bench that now is going to go out there and not get the ball. He doesn't need to get the ball because he's going to get rebounds. He's averaged 0.94 DraftKings points per minute this year with only a 10% usage rate. So sliding into the starting lineup doesn't really matter. 19% rebounding percentage this year is very good. Alex has him projected for 19 minutes, and still, is like 6.5 times his salary. I think he could play a few minutes more than that potentially. Doesn't have to, but the point being, even if he only gets around 20 minutes, he's likely to be a good value, and there's plenty of room for that to go up. So I think he looks good. I do think that you get some bump in production for guys like Levine, DeRozan, even Lonzo Ball potentially. With Vooch being out, hasn't been a high usage guy, like you said, but he's still a higher usage guy than Tony Bradley. We actually have Zach Levine right now projected to be the highest owned guy on the slate at 25%. I think he's a very good play at 8K. Even if Vooch were in, I would think Levine was a good option. But he's another one where, I think he's a good play, but there's no shortage of guys in that price range that can outscore Zach Levine any given day. So I don't mind, it's another one where I think probably going to look really good in cash. Wouldn't be surprised if I end up under the field in tournaments.
It's the thing about the Bulls that I had mentioned. We talked about it the other day. It's just, there's a lot of good players on this team, but it caps their ceilings. There's going to be days where one of them pops off and just takes over. But a lot of times you're like, all right, here's a 35 to 45 fantasy point game for your $8,000 or more. And that's tough for me with guys like Levine and DeRozan, but I get what you're saying for sure. But yeah, the Vooch thing is the biggest. What about Golden State and Curry? We talked about him a little bit, but obviously this feels like a matchup where, any matchup is a matchup where Curry could go nuclear. So it's really just a matter of, do you want to pay for him today?
For sure. And also one thing with the Bulls, if you want a value play from Chicago that isn't taking up a center spot, I think rolling the dice on Derrick Jones Jr. makes a lot of sense. This is a small Golden State team. You could certainly just see a bunch of small lineups from Chicago where Derrick Jones gets more minutes. So he's someone that I don't think is going to have near the ownership of Bradley, but certainly could give you comparable production. From the Golden State side, Curry's really expensive. Again, I'm never going to tell anyone not to play Stephen Curry. He quite literally can go score 80 plus DraftKings points, but my God, it's hard to pay for Stephen Curry when you have to find another $100 to get to Jokic, who averages, like a quarter of a point per minute more than Curry does. You have to find like $400 to get to Giannis, who same thing. So really, really difficult to get Curry into lineups. Draymond, Poole, I think are going to be easier to get to. You've seen increased playing time for Poole recently. He's getting those closing minutes, which is nice. They're okay. I think it's tough to get to much from Golden State. Kevon Looney coming off of a monster game last time out. He's 3,300 at center. I'm not looking to really go back there, but I guess he did show he has some sort of ceiling.
All right. I mean, by the way, we have 700 people watching. Appreciate you hanging out with us this morning. Hit that thumbs up if you haven't done so yet. We're 145, 700 watching. I don't know the ratio off the top of my head, but it could certainly be better. Only takes a single second to hit that thumbs up if you want to help support us here on the channel, and subscribe as well. We're north of 65,000. Thanks to you guys hanging with us every day. It does not go unnoticed. I promise you. I was thinking today, we got the best community in the world. Like looking at tweets and everything from the people in the Awesemo community. It doesn't get any better than this. It really doesn't. You got anything else for the Warriors before we close it out with Minnesota and the Lakers?
Nope.
All right. Wrap it up for me. Minnesota on the road against the Lakers, who playing at the fastest pace in the league this year, believe it or not. 224 total. Lakers laying 3 at home at the Staples.
Yeah, so fast-paced game here. Like you said, Lakers playing at the league's fastest pace. Minnesota's 9th. So there should be a lot of fantasy points to go around here. I think that Anthony Edwards just playing out of his mind this year, coming off of it. I think the best game of his career last time out. He's still only 8,100. That's like a perfect example of somebody that you can use as a pivot away from Levine. Edwards projected for 11% ownership on DraftKings compared to Levine's 25%. I think the range of outcomes is about identical for those two. Deangelo Russell, I mentioned it the other day. He played like 35 minutes in regulation 2 games ago, played 34 last game. So he struggled last game, didn't give you a good fantasy performance, but I really like getting to Deangelo Russell at this price tag. He prior to his injury, he was playing 29, 30 minutes, and he's priced for that now. But if he's going to play 34, 35 minutes consistently, he's going to have some massive games at this salary. So I really, really like getting to Russell. Right now, he is projected for only 11% ownership on DraftKings. So I think that's very reasonable as well. Towns is kind of, always fine, but not a priority for me. Patrick Beverley's been starting alongside Russell. He played 35 minutes against Golden State. I think he's a reasonable value option. So for me, it's Edwards, Russell, and Beverley is the guys that really stand out.
All right. On both sides, anything you want to cover? Anything else? Or are we done?
Westbrook and Davis are capable of scoring a lot of fantasy points. If you didn't already know that, I don't know what to tell you.
And then nothing else for the Lakers.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, keep an eye on their injury news. We had Rondo and Reeves miss the last game. That opened up opportunities for Malik Monk. It also opened up some opportunities for Wayne Ellington, who I think, and Josh pointed this out the other day, I think by the time the season's over, Ellington's playing a pretty big role in this team. So, you potentially get some just dart throw value if multiple guys are out on the Lakers. But for now, it's pretty much Westbrook, Davis, and neither one of them looks great anyway. Appreciate
you guys as always. Stick around. On the contrary, coming up next, got a big one. NHL strategy show follows. We've got just a ton of content on the channel today. Check out Adam's deep dive article. NFL strategy show top stacks is coming up this afternoon. Just so much. Oh, and if you're in the fantasy football, the Awesemo Fantasy Football Show, check it out, 2 p.m. Eastern on the Fantasy Football Channel. Hit Adam up at Ship My Money DFS. Help him keep that follower count above Josh Engelman's. And hit me up at Loughy_D, LOUGHY_D. Peace.